Hey guys, welcome to this C Sharp tutorial video on how to write your first C Sharp program. So let's get started. So you see on my screen, I don't have Visual Studio open. So let's start with the first step. Open Visual Studio. Once that is open, you will get this kind of layout structure. So to start your first program, hover to the top left in the file menu, click New Project. This will open a window, and what we are doing is creating a Windows form application. So make sure that under the templates you are under Visual C Sharp, and under that you are on Windows, and in the center select the option Windows form application. Now it is essential that you give a name to your project which makes some sense to what the project actually does. So we'll create a hello world application and just save it on your desired location. If you want to change the location, click browse and just navigate to the location where you want to save the project. In our case, we are saving it on the desktop. Once that is done, click OK. So Visual Studio will take about 5 seconds to initialize and load the project. Once that is done, you will see that in the center there's a design view and you have a form which is there, and you can resize it according to your needs. On the left we have the toolbox where you have all the controls which you will be needing to put on the form. Over on the right we have first the solution explorer where you have the directory structure of your project, and below that is the properties panel where you can change the property of the controls of the form. Now remember, the form itself is a control, and the first thing when we do when we start the project is change the name of the form or the header of the form. So to do that, just make sure that the form is selected. Now go to the properties panel and you can change the text property of the form. So since we are making a hello world application, let's name our form hello world and press enter, and you can see on the design view the header of the form has been changed. Let's just design a basic program where we have a button which when clicked displays the hello world. So on the toolbox, just search for button, drag it from the toolbox and place it on the form. Resize it accordingly so that the aesthetics of the form is well maintained and is pleasing to the eye. If you want, you can just eyeball it and resize the form accordingly. Now once the button is clicked, now let's just put a relevant text on the button. The button 1 doesn't tell the user what it does, so let's put a text on it. Select the button and hover back to the properties panel and select the text property of the button. Let's call it display message. Press enter and you see that the text is there but is not there entirely. So let's just resize the button a little bit and there you go. Now since we'll be using this button in the code, it is also a standard convention that you rename the button, change it from the default name to a more relevant name. So to do that, just select the button and in the properties panel search for the name property, and you see under design tab you have the name property. So it is the default name, and let's give it a name which makes sense that what the button does. So let's call it display button. Now the thing you'll note here is I wrote the first word in lowercase and the first letter of the second word in capital. So this is called camel case, and it's a standard convention used by programmers. So let's try and follow that. Now once that is done, the front end of our application is made and we just want to write the code. So to do that, we want to write a code on what event is triggered when this button is clicked. So to go to the code file, just double click on the control in which you want to code. So let's do that and then it will direct us to the code file. So you see that form1.cs, which is our code file, is open. Now before writing the code, let's just go through some common practices which you should always do whenever you are making any program. So at the top you see there are some directives, and these directives are basically files located in your system which are required by Visual Studio in order to process some of the functions. So you see some of the files or the directives are in gray. So these are the directives which are not being used currently. So it's better that you delete those. So always the directives which are not being used in your program, just delete them, because it's just utilizing unnecessary space. Once that is done, it is also important that you add a comment section at the very top of your program describing how what the program does, who is it created by. So for the time constraints, I've already have that information copied, and I'll just go paste it here. So you see the programmer name is there, the project, what's the name of the project, the date it was created, and the description, just to give a little insight. Now let's go to our display button underscore click event handler. So whatever we write in this event handler will eventually happen when that button is clicked. So all we want to do is display a message. So to do that, let's just write message box dot show, and inside that let's just write a string which says hello world, and let's end that with a semicolon. So basically our program is done. Click save, but then again, it for future reference, if somebody is referencing your code, just write a comment that this line is to display the message, and save it. Once that is done, you see that there are no red squiggles. That means your code is correct, your design is correct, the form has a label on top which is relevant to the design, the button has a relevant text, and the name of the button is relevant in the code. So the last important thing is to make sure that once you run your application, your form displays at the center of the screen. So to do that, just select the form and go to the properties panel and search for an option called start position. So if you scroll down, there's something called start position. It is set to the default location, but let's change it to center screen. Once that is done, click save, and now let's run your application, your first C# application on Visual Studio. So it has opened nicely at the center of the screen. The form's titled hello world, and there's a button which reads out display message. So once we click that message, we have a message box popped up which says hello world. So, and that's the whole purpose of this exercise, that you have created your first C# project in Visual Studio. Thank you so much.